Magnus Carlsen against Prague. This game features an irregular opening. It features a center occupied by pieces, which is a super interesting dynamic that we'll kind of analyze and learn from. And then it features a stunning blow in the end, a decoy tactic paired with a rook sacrifice. So we're in for a nice little game here today. Now this game comes from the Tata Steel event currently going on. We have the rapid section, Magnus Carlsen finished number 1, and then we have the blitz, and Magnus Carlsen is currently also placed number 1. No surprise there. Magnus Carlsen definitely is a beast. He's continuing to play at very strong strength, and this game right here shows that. So let's jump straight in. The game featured a Caro-Kann, and I mentioned that there's an irregular opening. This, of course, is very regular, very typical. So what do I mean? Well, knight f3 is played, and then d3 is played. And this is where things begin to become very strange, because generally against the Caro-Kann, almost exclusively, the move d4 is played. You can start by playing knight c3 or knight f3, but d4 is the main avenue for white to try to chip away at black center and for white to try to fight for control over the center. When you play for d3, you're playing a far more passive approach in the center, and what this means is that it enables you to then be more aggressive on the flanks, on the queen side and on the king side. Now, okay, that's very abstract. Does this actually come into fruition in this game? It does. Bishop g4, h3, g4 very soon comes, and then h4, and then g5. So in general, when you play a bit more solid in the center, it enables you to be more aggressive on the king side, and these pawns here are definitely well placed for a king side attack. Now already, by move 9, we have a fresh new position. Okay, knight d7, there's a couple other games here, but largely speaking, especially after b3, nobody has seen this before, and Magnus Carlsen, I think, was quite happy with this. Getting out of theory, he has a clear idea of fianchettoing the bishop. You can see that the dark squares are definitely where white is trying to play. And also, because white neglected playing d4 and we didn't get a locked up structure in the center, what you're going to see is the lack of pawns in the center lend themselves to a center occupied by pieces rather than pawns. This is the second big theme that you're going to start to see emerge. Look at already black's massive control over the center with pieces. Now there's a couple of things that I would point to and I think are instructive when it comes to pieces in the center occupying much of the board. Number one, when you have a setup like this, there are many more opportunities for tactics, right? All of the pieces can work together to create some pretty sweet tactical possibilities. We'll actually see this as the ending for the game today. But number two, pawns become a lot more effective at breaking up the center. So for example, if this was simply a pawn structure that was kind of solid and let's say closed, then the pawn push f4 might be useful and it might be the way to go, but it wouldn't come with as much of a bang as it comes with here, right? f4 comes, attacks the knight, then you can play f5 attacking the bishop or e5 attacking the other bishop, your bishop comes to life. All of these pawn moves become 10 times more useful and important and powerful because they're attacking pawns, and so definitionally it means that the opponent has a lot more that they need to react to. Okay, how does this continue? Black castles long. This is another interesting theme that I didn't highlight in the beginning of the video, but I think is also useful to point out. Because of white's extremely aggressive setup on the king side, both sides decided, let's castle on the queen side, we might actually be more safe there. Okay, bishop a3, the bishop's developing, the king moves away from the diagonal of the bishop. This makes sense, but as the engine shows, it was maybe a little bit too much prophylaxis, because now, after the king moves away and does much the same, eventually f4 does come. Like I was saying, f4 comes, and it comes with pretty serious effect. If the knight moves, then the pawn on g7 hangs, and there's not really any alternative because of the fact that the center is occupied by pieces. So occupying the center by pieces can be very strong and allow you to engage in a lot of cool tactics, but it can also be a very big vulnerability, and I think you see that here. So the knight moves away, we can chop that knight off and then take the pawn in g7, right? This is what white has earned, and Magnus Carlsen already has a pretty significant advantage. The pawn on g4 is weak, the bishop is active, the dark squares are under control, this knight is going to be able to activate, and white has clearly a center majority. f5 and again e5 are always things that you want to be looking towards. Okay, the knight comes to c4, attacking the bishop, And after the bishop takes on f4, we have the knight coming and to d3, right? So both pieces are activating for white. Meanwhile, black is quite passive, and I think you need to look no further than these rooks. They are a pair of very sad rooks, right? They are not looking at each other, especially the rook on h7. What is it doing, right? It is attacking a pawn, but aside from that, it has literally no way to activate itself back into the game because both of those squares needed to do so are under control by the bishop on f6. Quite a monster piece on f6. Okay, the bishop comes and moves to g3, and then the knight comes and attacks the rook. Maybe not the best, but definitely comes with some tempo, and definitely Magnus Carlsen is keeping his initiative. We have a trade of the rooks, but all this does is strengthen white's ultimate control in the center. Now, I'm going to pause here for a moment before we start getting into the really cool tactics which begin on the very next couple of moves. I want to go back just a moment and show you something that I think is quite instructive. If we take this position here, I think someone at first glance might look at this and say, whoa, black is really active, they have all of their pieces developed, especially before bishop a3, the knight are coming and they're very passive, black seems better here. But the issue is that this is an illusion, because f4 is such an easy way to change the entire situation, right? The bishop gets active, and then the knight gets active, and then the other knight gets active, and then you trade the only active rook for black, and in the resulting position, white has complete dominance in the center. So I thought that was kind of an interesting transformation and quite instructive as well. Let's now look at the fun tactical finish. We have the knight coming to d6. Now, admittedly, it was already too late thanks to white's superior piece placement, but this adds a very fun possibility onto the board, and Magnus Carlsen is not one to miss those. So pause the video, try to find this. This is really cool. We have first a trade of the knight, nothing wrong there, but then rook takes and immediate resignation. And you might be wondering, what is the point? Well, if the queen were to recapture, here is where the decoy comes into effect. Bishop to e5, pinning and winning the queen. But okay, the bishop's undefended, but now the knight comes in, swoops to d7, picks up the queen on e5, and the game is over from there. So a very magnificent finish, very spectacular. You have a simple trade, but then a rook sacrifice with bishop e5 and a fork. You have everything you could want: a piece sacrifice, a skewer of sorts, a decoy, a fork, winning the queen, and the game finished very quickly with resignation. So I thought this was a cool game. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well. The Tata Steel is bringing us quite a bit of magic, and I think this game is just one of those treats that I wanted to share with you. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you're new around here, like the video if you learned something new from it, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.